The icy breath of dawn wrapped the narrow street in Nanjing. Vương Sán's fingers curled nervously around a black plastic bag, her heart pounding like a distant drum. A smell, foul and heavy, crept from beneath the closed door of apartment 202, chilling her more than the winter air ever could. She paused. The scent was unmistakable decay, something unnatural. Memories surfaced, her own daughter, gone years ago, lost in a world she could no longer reach. Was this a cruel echo, or something darker lurking behind that locked door? The faint echo of hurried footsteps faded as Vương Sán hurried to alert neighbors, her voice trembling as she whispered warnings. The alley filled with cautious glances, hushed conversations, the hum of an awakening city soon overshadowed by growing dread. Inside the apartments, silence reigned. The faint creak of a floorboard, a sigh of wind through cracked windows, small sounds that felt like the city holding its breath. Somewhere, a distant clock ticked, its rhythm pounding in the ears of those drawn to the scene. Vương Sán's mind raced. What secret horrors could hide behind a locked door and silence, she wondered, her breath catching as she envisioned what lay beyond, a nightmare waiting patiently for discovery. The first police officers arrived, their footsteps echoing like thunder in the narrow hallway. They exchanged grim looks, professionals no stranger to tragedy, yet even they hesitated at the threshold, sensing something profoundly wrong. Whispers of a stifling stench grew louder, wrapping around the officers as if the very air was thick with secrets. One officer reached for the door handle, his hands steady, but his eyes betrayed the chill creeping into his soul. As the door creaked open, an overwhelming wave of decay and silence burst forth, thick, suffocating. The hallway beyond was dark, the floor slick with stains that no one dared name aloud. In the shadows, Vương Sán imagined the final moments of those trapped within, silent cries, desperate breaths, the unbearable weight of fear. Her mind flickered between the real and the imagined, her pulse rising with the unspoken horror. The officers moved cautiously inside, their radios whispering updates, footsteps careful on the cracked tiles. Each corner turned revealed fragments of a story too terrible to tell, a silent scream etched into every surface. Outside, the street grew crowded. Neighbors gathered, their faces pale, eyes wide with disbelief. Some clutched hands, others stared silently at the door they now feared, wondering what nightmare could shatter their fragile peace. Vương Sán's voice, once steady, now broke as she shared what she'd found. Her tale spread like wildfire, a spark igniting fear, sorrow, and the slow unraveling of a hidden nightmare that had festered in silence far too long. The chilling question lingered in the winter air: what secrets had the silence concealed? What shadows had grown in the cold stillness of apartment 202? As the sun rose higher, casting light on cracked walls and broken lives, the city watched silently, caught between hope and horror. In that fragile dawn, one truth became painfully clear: some doors, once closed, can never be shut again. So we ask you, the silent witness to this unfolding nightmare, what secret horrors can hide behind a closed door and silence? Detective Lamdad cautiously stepped inside apartment 202. The air was thick and stale, carrying a heavy scent that clawed at his senses. Every footfall echoed on the cold tile floor, as his eyes strained to pierce the dim light, searching for the silent stories hidden within these walls. His flashlight revealed dark stains smeared across the floor, footprints muddied and bloody, tracing a chaotic path. The detective's breath caught, not from the chill, but from the raw intensity of a nightmare frozen in time. In the living room lay the first body, a woman frozen in eternal sorrow, her face etched with a silent plea for justice. The wounds on her body told tales of pain and betrayal, unspoken yet haunting. An old clock ticked relentlessly on the wall, its sound the only pulse in the suffocating stillness. Time itself seemed to have halted in this room, a chamber of frozen fear and despair. The walls bore cruel evidence, scratches clawed deeply into plaster, blood splattered in jagged patterns. The air held whispers of a desperate struggle, a violent symphony played in silence. In the quiet corners of his mind, Lamdad imagined the victim's final moments, a silent scream, a fleeting hope snuffed out before it could ignite. The killer's shadow lingered like a stain, methodical, cold, and unseen, leaving behind a trail of sorrow woven into the fabric of this once happy home. Every item, every surface was a piece of the puzzle. The forensic team moved meticulously, their gloved hands uncovering the silent truth hidden in each smear, each drop. Lamdad's thoughts churned. How could a person harbor such darkness? What torments breed a heart capable of such cruelty? The soft rustle of torn curtains, the faint creak of the old window frame swaying in the breeze, the apartment itself seemed to whisper stories of loss and despair. Light flickered as the flashlight's beam swept across peeling wallpaper and faded photographs, reminders of a family torn apart, frozen in the aftermath of violence. Hours slipped by as investigators worked in silence, exhaustion etched deep into their faces. They understood, every detail mattered, every small clue could unlock the door to justice. At times, Lamdad felt he heard faint, almost imperceptible voices, echoes of the past trying to break through the oppressive silence. In that frozen space, fear and empathy intermingled, a heavy, bittersweet cocktail that weighed on every soul in the room. And as the final door closed behind them, the silent testament remained, a chilling reminder that sometimes, silence screams louder than words. So tell me, how does one unravel a story told only by silence and blood? I remember the first time I met the Le family, a family that to outsiders seemed ordinary, even enviable. Le Quan, the patriarch, was a respected businessman in the neighborhood. His wife, a gentle woman named Mai, was often seen smiling softly in the local market. Their children, Min and Loi, attended nearby schools, and the little ones played happily in the courtyard. To many, they were the picture of harmony. But as I dug deeper into their story, shadows began to emerge beneath that surface. The smiles masked silent tensions, unspoken resentments. Neighbors whispered about heated arguments behind closed doors, the sharp crackle of voices that quickly fell silent when anyone approached. I learned that Loi, the son, was a restless spirit, struggling with expectations that felt like chains. Pressure from his father to succeed in the family business weighed heavily, while his own desires seemed ignored or dismissed. His mother Mai, torn between protecting her children and maintaining peace, often found herself caught in the middle, a silent witness to fractures that slowly deepened. Friends told me of nights when Mai would lock herself in her room, tears quietly falling behind the door. Even the youngest daughter, Ngoc, seemed to carry a weight beyond her years, a quiet sadness that none dared to address openly. The laughter of children echoed less often, replaced by long silences and tentative glances. The cracks in their family weren't sudden. They had been building, slowly, like fissures running beneath solid ground, invisible until the earth finally gave way. Mistrust grew between Loy and his father, words exchanged that cut deeper than any blade. Rumors circulated that Loy struggled with alcohol, a secret burden that pushed him further from the family's embrace. Some spoke quietly of an affair, whispers that Mai sought comfort elsewhere, perhaps as an escape from the growing storm at home. Whether true or not, these rumors fed the tension, like dry tinder waiting for a spark. I visited the neighborhood many times, watching from afar as the family moved through their days. The smiles at the market felt rehearsed, the polite nods stiff and forced. Behind closed doors, the air was thick with silence, the kind that screams in its quietness. Even neighbors who once admired the lane now spoke of fear of what might be lurking behind the walls, fear of an inevitable tragedy that no one dared to face. I recall a late evening when I heard raised voices, sharp, desperate, filled with pain. It was Loy, shouting words I couldn't quite catch, his tone raw with anguish. Then, a sudden slam, a silence more terrifying than any sound. That night felt like a breaking point, a prelude to a darkness that would consume the family whole. But even then, some clung to hope that the fractures could heal, that love might still find a way. I often wonder what conversations were left unspoken, what forgiveness was withheld, what cries for help were lost in the noise of pride and pain. The Le family's story is a mirror, reflecting the hidden battles many face behind closed doors, the silent wounds that society often overlooks. As I piece together these fragments, I'm left with a haunting question: can a family worn thin by pain ever truly find peace before it's too late? And now, I ask you, beneath the surface of every family, what secrets wait in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered? Among the shattered fragments of the Le family, one piece was glaringly absent: Le Loy, the son whose silence spoke volumes louder than words. As the community grappled with shock, whispers spread: where was he? Why had he vanished? Neighbors recalled seeing Le Loy last weeks before the tragedy, a solitary figure pacing the narrow alleys, eyes clouded with a storm of unspoken pain. His shoulders hunched, burdened not just by the weight of family expectations, but by demons only he could see. Inside the household, tensions had long simmered beneath a fragile facade. Le Loy was the outlier, the restless soul bruised by relentless pressure, the unforgiving grip of family honor, unspoken resentments, and the sting of neglect. Friends spoke in hushed tones of his spiraling isolation, nights lost to alcohol, eyes bloodshot from restless torment. The scars of rejection etched deeper than any wound, cutting through flesh to the soul's core. Rumors tangled with truth. Some whispered of his wife's infidelity, a betrayal that shattered fragile trust and ignited flames of rage and despair. Others hinted at his erratic behavior, a man pushed to the brink, teetering on the edge of darkness. The police files told a story of conflict, heated arguments overheard by neighbors, slammed doors echoing late into the night, a home fractured by voices raised and words that cut deeper than any blade. Yet, beyond the bruises and broken words lay a complex human portrait, a young man trapped in a labyrinth of expectations, shame, and a desperate yearning to be understood. Investigators pieced together his last days, tense encounters, hurried phone calls, cryptic messages sent into the void. A man unraveling, slipping further from the grasp of those who might have helped. In quiet moments, officers speculated on the unbearable weight that must have crushed him, the shame of failure, the stigma of addiction, the suffocating silence that no one dared to break. The missing son became both suspect and victim, a figure shrouded in mystery, a symbol of fractured familial bonds and the silent suffering hidden behind closed doors. Psychologists called attention to the societal pressure cooker, where honor and duty clash with personal pain, often erupting in catastrophic ways when support is absent. In the court of public opinion, opinions divided. Some saw Loy as a cold-hearted murderer, others as a deeply wounded soul lost in the shadows of a harsh world. Family members wrestled with grief and disbelief, haunted by questions that had no easy answers. How did we miss the signs? Could love have saved him? Or was this a tragedy destined to unfold? As the investigation deepened, it became clear that Loy's disappearance was not just physical, it was the vanishing of hope, the erasure of connection in a family overwhelmed by secrets and sorrow. And so we ask, when isolation grows, how far can a broken soul truly fall before it vanishes into the night? The night of November 23rd descended upon the city like a heavy curtain, shrouding the apartment complex in darkness. Inside Unit 202, a storm of rage and despair was about to erupt, one that would shatter the fragile peace of a family and leave scars on a community's soul. I remember the subtle sounds: doors locking, muffled footsteps pacing back and forth, a breath held too long in silence. The air was thick with tension, a storm building behind closed doors no one could yet see. Loy's mind churned with a tempest of emotions. Years of resentment, betrayal, and isolation converged into a violent crescendo. His thoughts fractured between hatred for those he felt had wronged him and the shreds of a brother he once was. The first cries pierced the night, a desperate scream from the kitchen as chaos erupted. It was the moment when love twisted into destruction, when family bonds snapped beneath the weight of unspoken pain. I've heard from neighbors that the shouts were unlike any ordinary argument. They were raw, primal, filled with an unbearable agony that echoed down the hallways, shaking windows and unsettling even the coldest hearts. The sharp clang of metal cut through the cries, the unforgiving bite of a dagger in skilled hands. Each strike deliberate, a morbid dance of destruction choreographed by years of silent suffering. Inside, bodies fell: 3 women, 1 man, 2 innocent children. The brutality spared no one. No corner of that small apartment was left untouched by the storm of hatred unleashed in those dark hours. As the violence subsided, a chilling silence claimed the apartment. Loy, exhausted but resolute, moved carefully through the blood-streaked rooms, attempting to erase the evidence of his fury, washing away the traces of his broken soul. The cold calculation that followed spoke volumes. This was not the act of a mind consumed by fleeting madness, but of one trapped in an abyss where mercy had long since fled. Outside, the world continued unaware. The neon signs flickered, the city hummed with life, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding within the locked door of 202. But inside, the horror had carved itself into the very fabric of the home, transforming what was once a sanctuary into a tomb of shattered dreams and silenced voices. I often wonder about those last moments. Did any of them know what was coming? Did the children's eyes, wide with confusion and fear, seek answers in a world suddenly stripped of safety? And what of Loy's shattered spirit? What pain or emptiness drove him to commit such unspeakable acts against his own flesh and blood? Neighbors later spoke of strange silence: no laughter, no arguments, just an oppressive quiet that blanketed the building in the days that followed, as if even the walls mourned. That night marked not just a crime, but a fracture in the community's heart, an unbearable loss that demanded justice, healing, and above all, understanding. As the investigation began, one haunting question lingered: what darkness could turn a son into a killer, and could such shadows ever be lifted from a family so deeply broken? The chilling stillness that had gripped Nanjing since the discovery of the crime scene now morphed into a relentless hunt. Police officers, detectives, and forensic experts pored over every shred of evidence, aware that the city's fragile sense of security depended on their success. For them, this was no longer just a case, it was a solemn promise to the victim and her grieving family. Detective Lee, a veteran with years of experience, sat staring at the map pinned with dozens of markers, each representing a lead, a possible sighting, or a tip. His fingers traced the routes carefully, looking for patterns in the chaos. The pressure to find the culprit was a weight pressing on his chest. The investigation soon zeroed in on a familiar figure, someone known but elusive. Ellie Loy, the victim's close acquaintance, had vanished in the days following the discovery. His sudden disappearance cast a long shadow of suspicion, sending whispers through the community like wildfire. Friends and neighbors remembered Ellie Loy as troubled, withdrawn, irritable, and often at odds with those around him. His recent behavior was marked by strange absences, bursts of anger, and a withdrawal from social circles. Many sensed that something within him had fractured, but none expected the depth of darkness that awaited discovery. As the days stretched on, police tracked his movements through CCTV footage and witness reports. The trail led through narrow streets, crowded markets, and quiet parks, places where Ellie Loy sought refuge, perhaps trying to outrun the guilt or the law itself. Then came the breakthrough, a tip from a local informant who spotted Ellie Loy in a rundown neighborhood on the city's outskirts. A tense, silent stakeout began, blending shadows with hope. The officers watched, hearts pounding, waiting for the moment justice could finally take shape. The arrest was swift but quiet, avoiding a scene that might have further shattered the city's nerves. Ellie Loy was taken into custody, his face expressionless yet revealing a hint of something unspoken, perhaps relief, or the heavy burden of guilt. In the interrogation room, the cold air mingled with the weight of unspoken truths. Ellie Loy sat opposite Detective Lee, silence stretching before the first questions broke through the tension like a knife. His eyes flickered with a complicated storm: anger, remorse, defiance. The confession came in fragments, words heavy with pain and anger. He spoke of pressures, of family conflicts that had built like a silent tempest. Of feeling trapped and misunderstood, pushed to the edge by shadows no one else could see. Despite the horror of his actions, Ellie Loy's words revealed a deeply fractured soul, one shattered by isolation, resentment, and despair. His attempts to clean the scene, to erase his presence, were futile acts of denial in the face of irreversible loss. The case, once a maze of questions, now had a face and a name. But the journey toward justice was far from over. The city watched, hearts heavy yet hopeful, as legal proceedings promised to unearth the full truth. Lawyers and judges prepared for a trial that would not only seek justice for the victim but also confront the uncomfortable realities of family, mental health, and societal pressure, issues too often whispered in silence. As the trial unfolded, witnesses recounted the painful story, the tensions that simmered beneath the family's surface, the warning signs missed, and the unbearable silence that allowed tragedy to take root. The verdict, when delivered, was a solemn moment, a painful closure to a chapter marked by loss but also a call for awareness and compassion in the face of human frailty. As the gavel fell, the city exhaled, carrying with it the echoes of grief and hope, a reminder that justice is not just about punishment, but about learning, healing, and preventing future darkness. And so, with justice finally on the horizon, a new chapter beckoned, one of reflection, healing, and the relentless pursuit of a safer, more compassionate society. As we stand at the close of this harrowing tale, the echoes of pain still linger, but so too does the fragile light of hope. The loss of Due Iton is not just a number in a cold statistic, it is a world of dreams and love abruptly silenced. In the quiet moments that follow tragedy, communities have the power to bind their wounds, to create spaces where grief can be voiced, where memories are honored, and where healing can slowly begin. Families, friends, and even strangers find connection in shared sorrow. Through empathy and understanding, a collective strength is born, a promise that the shadows of violence will not define the light of the future. Yet, the wounds run deeper than what can be seen. The scars of trauma ripple across generations, reminding us that true justice is not only about punishment, but about healing, prevention, and compassion. Experts remind us of the critical need for mental health awareness and support systems, especially in fast-paced societies where isolation and pressure often go unnoticed until tragedy strikes. Education must reach beyond textbooks, teaching us to recognize signs of suffering in ourselves and others, and to extend kindness without hesitation. And while justice found its way through the law, the real victory is in nurturing a society where no one feels so alone or desperate that they turn to darkness. We must also hold space for forgiveness, not as a denial of pain, but as a courageous step toward freedom from the past. As you watch this story unfold, ask yourself, what can I do in my own community to be a light for those who suffer in silence? How can I help transform pain into healing? Thank you for journeying with us through this difficult story. If it has moved you, please share your thoughts below. Your voice can be part of the healing and awareness this world so desperately needs. Remember to like, subscribe, and join us for more stories that bring light to the darkest places, and inspire hope where it is needed most. In a world that sometimes seems shadowed by silence and fear, may we all choose to be the light that guides each other home.